This evening, we're going to do a meditation called A Day with Jesus. Subtitle, Jesus was a normal man. Now, we know that Jesus was not a normal man, but he lived a normal everyday life like us. And he went through days that were busy, and he went through days where he was going from one thing to the next, and he ran into people, and chance circumstances happened sometimes. You know, setting aside the fact that Jesus knew everything and that he probably orchestrated everything that we wanted it to be. But, you know, at the same time, he was, by most accounts, a very normal human person. We want to experience him like a normal person. We want to have the experience of the apostles who lived with him from the day to day like a normal person. And at the same time, this meditation is about his generosity, his commitment to people, commitment to the mission, and to self-giving, even when he was tired and exhausted. We're going to meditate on Mark 1:21-39. That's a long passage, so I won't read you the whole thing. But it's that part of the Gospel of Mark where he's doing one thing, and then it says immediately after that, this happened. And then immediately after that, this happened. And then that evening, this happened. And then early the next morning, he went out and was praying. And as soon as they found him, he said, "Let's go somewhere else so I can preach there also." My favorite episode from The Chosen is the campfire episode. The campfire episode where the apostles are, you remember this? The apostles are all sitting around and having this whole discussion the whole time, and you can hear off in the distance people cheering and healings happening, and you know they're taking shifts being with Jesus, taking breaks, but Jesus doesn't get a break. Jesus is there the whole time, and you don't see Jesus the whole time. You hear sounds, but you don't get to see what's going on. And then they get in this argument. You know, they get in a fight because it seems like Matthew's not worthy to be among the group, and they're correcting each other, and they're standing up against each other and about to get in a big fight. And all of a sudden, Jesus stumbles by, and he's like limping, and he's out of breath. I mean, he's been working all day, and he's tired. He's got blood on his face and on his hands and his feet from people bleeding on him, and he can't even like bend over to get his sandals off. And Mary's there like helping him get his sandals off, and the apostles are just like, they can't believe it. It's the message hits so strong because there's such a contrast. Their stupidity fighting over stuff like that, and Jesus just giving himself to the point where he drops. He doesn't have enough time to stop at the campfire. He needs to rest. I had a little lesson in my personal life about generosity and giving. It was on missions up there in Hamilton. In the winter, it gets really cold, and we give out clothing to people. So there's this one church that gives out food, and we set up little tables there and put all the donated clothes on the tables, and the homeless can come along and just like pick out what they want, what they need. But last winter we were doing this, and there's one day it was really, really cold. Like the volunteers would take turns standing outside because it would like freeze through your boots and into your toes if you stood out there too long. So at one point I was out there standing at this table, and people were coming and grabbing stuff, and this man came who literally looked like he was almost dead, and he told us that he had slept outside that night, and he was pretty much freezing to death. And he probably was on drugs, probably wasn't there mentally fully, but he didn't have enough clothes either. So like we were giving him what we had. We had like some extra shirts and an extra sweater, and we didn't have any winter coats, you know? And for a second I thought, well, I could give him my coat, but then what would I wear? So we gave him what we could and sent him on his way. 2 weeks later, I don't even know where this happened, but my coat disappeared. Completely lost, and I went and looked for it and couldn't find it. And I was like, you know what? I should have just given my coat away. if in God's plan I was going to end up losing it anyways. It would have been easy for me to get a new coat, and I had to get a new coat anyways, because I lost the one that I had. So I was like, if that ever happens to me again, I'm not keeping my coat. And sure enough, this year we went on missions, and we were out at the same place doing the same thing, and this guy came along who didn't have a coat, and it was really cold, and he was like trying on other pieces of clothing, and they weren't fitting him. And I was like, man, here, just take my coat. And he was so happy. He was like lit up. He was ecstatic. And we got to our group took a selfie with him and stuff, took a picture with him. And that night, one of the families of the missionaries gave me a new coat, which is the one I still use today. So God provides. God provides. But the point there is the generosity. Jesus was willing to give and give and give without stopping. He didn't have limits on his giving. And that's what we want to contemplate today. In his ordinary everyday life, long before the cross and all that stuff, he showed us his way of life. He showed us his heart through his self-giving. One more story, if you'll permit me, is my first Good Friday as a priest. I went to this. I was in Rome finishing my license in theology, and I'd just been ordained a few months ago in December, and went out. I was going out to the Colosseum to meet with a family from Canada that I knew from a long time before that, and so we had planned to meet there. And I was passing by this one church. They were having their Good Friday celebration inside, and it was really full. It was the Divine Mercy Church, the Santo Spirito, I think it's called. So naturally, Divine Mercy, Good Friday, it was a big thing, and it was packed full of people. And I just kind of walk up, and someone turns to me and says, "Padre," and they're like, "Can you hear my confession?" And so I sat down, heard their confession, and next thing you know, there was a huge lineup. And I heard confessions for 3 hours and missed my appointment with the family from Canada at the Colosseum, But what a blessing. That was the occasion where, this is a typical story of priests, but where I got to hear the confession of someone who had had a grave sin and hadn't been to confession since before I was born. I guess I was probably 33 at the time, so more than 34 years separated from God, and I got to be the one to absolve this person from their sins through the grace of God. But yeah, that spirit of keeping going, when you're tired. So that's what we want to contemplate in Jesus. Imagine that Jesus was like this every day. I think it's such a blessing that St. Mark gives us that story of one event following the next. Most of the Gospels kind of leave it kind of vague, what the sequence of events was. And this one really, really points it out, Verse 29, Mark 1:29, as soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever. So as soon as they left, and then it does skip a few hours, but it says that evening after sunset, they brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed, and the whole town gathered at the door. So imagine this day spent with him as if you were spending it with a best friend, and apply your senses to every little scene. Again, like you're the movie director, but with the power to stop it and to slow it down, and even to pause it and go and talk to Jesus and ask him questions and look at how people are feeling. And what's in his heart especially. Maybe you've had a day like that where you've actually spent a day with a good friend, or even as a community. One of those days when you all go on hike together and you all spend the evening together, like on vacation. You're with those people the whole day. It'd be like be with Jesus the whole day, kind of like that. Maybe for a few minutes he goes off by himself or something, but most of the time you're together. So I invite you just to take it easy, take it slow. I'm not even going to go through all the points that I prepared, but you've got Jesus teaching in the synagogue, his face, his voice, the love in his voice, and how he wins people over, and how people are wrapped up in his teaching. you can stop it and let yourself be amazed at how amazing Jesus is in his teaching. And then the episode with the demon, first there's fear and everyone's scared, but Jesus does not get scared. Jesus doesn't flinch. He's not afraid of the devil, of the demon. He looks straight at him. He looks him in the eyes. Think of what you would do if there was a possessed person in front of you. And he speaks sternly and commanding, and he's got authority. So again, pause it there. Jesus, you're so amazing. How do you do that? And then after that, you've got that little walk to Simon's house. So maybe you've got a chance to talk to him, to ask him questions, to tell him something, to tell him how amazed he is. But he's in a hurry because they've got someone else to go and help. So it's just like from one thing to the next. He's not taking any breaks. Or maybe he does take little stops along the way, but it's to help other people, to give someone a blessing, to heal somebody here and there. We know that in other passages of the gospel that happened. The hemorrhaging woman, she was like healed on the way to go and do something else. And he never turns to someone with annoyance or with impatience. Everyone who stops him along the way, he turns to them with love, with a look of love in his eyes. He's always there for everyone. He's so determined to get where he's got to go, and yet he's so patient with interruptions. And then Jesus in Simon's house with his mother-in-law. You can leave Eden out of it. Just kidding. Whatever you want. Obviously, he had a wife too, so that's helpful to have the whole picture. You can see Jesus' ability to feel empathy, to feel the sorrow of other people in their suffering. It really hurts him to see her suffering. We can stop and ask him, Jesus, does it hurt you every time that you see someone suffering? And we get to Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. We'll contemplate Jesus' feelings and his empathy and his heart again. But was it just for some people? I don't think so. I think Jesus' heart was tirelessly empathic, tirelessly feeling for others and caring about others. So see the healing and the joy and praise him and thank him for it and adore him. And then maybe you can invent a little moment of what happens that evening, the meal with their family. Maybe they sit down for a meal at the table with Simon's family and whoever else is there, James and John. And like I was saying, it's just a normal day with Jesus. So, I'll bet you Simon's mother-in-law is like pulling out all the food she can and making it a big feast, trying to show her gratitude. And maybe everyone's concerned that Jesus will eat because he hasn't eaten all day and he's been busy all day and he's never thinking of himself. And he's still teaching and he's still talking about good things and edifying everybody. Or maybe you like to think that sometimes Jesus wasn't teaching and he just acted normal and he liked to tell jokes and stuff. And, maybe whenever the conversation was too serious, he was the one to lighten it up a little bit, kind of like in The Chosen, right? And then someone knocks at the door. And they get up and they answer the door. They say, we heard that Jesus was in here. We've got someone who's sick, right? Like, okay. So they're like, well, he's eating now. Please give him a moment. And Jesus gets up and says, no, don't give me a moment. I'll heal this person. So he heals the person. And they're like, oh my goodness, it's healed. Amazing. It's a miracle. Thank you, Jesus. And then they leave and they close the door. And they go back and eating and they're joking and talking. And then 2 minutes later, knock. Right? We heard from Jonas over there that you healed people. Because they're like going around telling the whole town, And before you know it, everyone's there. And Jesus is like standing in the doorway at the entrance of the house, and he's just like one person to the next. His food is getting cold on the table, right? He's awesome. So I don't know. And then it's so funny that they lose track of Jesus and he disappears in the morning, So I kind of like to think I kind of like to think like what happened that evening. Maybe he was out there all night and the other disciples went to bed early while he was still healing people, And when they wake up, they're like, oh my goodness, where's Jesus? And he's not there. So they go looking for him, right? And there somebody spots him up on the hill. Oh, shoot. He's praying. He got up early to go and pray after a day like yesterday. And then they catch up to him. Jesus, everyone is looking for you. Oh, so we need to add a part where everyone's looking for him, It's like they're going around the town like, hey, have you seen Jesus? No, I saw him last night. Hey, where is he? And everyone's like looking for him. And then finally they find him. And he says, let's go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That is why I've come. It was an adventure following Jesus every day. So that's what we want to experience in this meditation.